40 years of being the one everyone leaned on. And the one time I leaned on myself, they treated it like a crime scene. My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 64 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, up on the Ridge Road past Beaver Dam, in a house I built with my own two hands starting back in 1987. I've lived here 38 years, same porch, same gravel driveway, same man standing on it. I spent 31 years as a master electrician, ran my own crew for the last 18 of them, contracting on everything from hospital wings to church steeples. Up before dawn, tools loaded before the coffee finished brewing. My late wife Carol used to say I still owned the same leather work belt from 1994 because I refused to spend money on myself while our two kids needed braces, cleats, and college tuition. What the kids never knew was that every job bonus, every profit-sharing check, every dollar I didn't spend on myself went into an account I opened the year my son was born. I didn't show it off. I just let it grow, quietly, for over 3 decades. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. My 64th birthday landed on a Tuesday in early July. My daughter-in-law made a pot roast. My son Derek and my daughter Amy both called. Nice calls, short calls. The kind where you're checking your phone the whole time and hang up 9 minutes later feeling like you got a full meal off a single cracker. But that's fine. They've got their own lives now. I understand that. What they didn't know, what nobody on this earth knew, was that 4 days before my birthday, I'd walked into Harrison Marine on Lake Wylie and put a deposit down on a 2024 Boston Whaler 320 Outrage, twin engines, full electronics package. The kind of boat I'd stood next to at that same dealership every single year for 9 years running, just looking, never asking the price out loud because I already knew I couldn't let myself want it that badly. $142,000, paid in full, cash. I drove up from the lake that evening in my truck, sat in my driveway for a long while before I went inside, just looking at the photo on my phone of her sitting in her slip, white hull catching the last of the sun. I felt something I hadn't felt in a year. Not pride in my kids, not relief that the bills were paid, not the quiet exhaustion of being needed. I felt like Robert again, not Dad, not the guy who always picks up the tab, just me. I should have known that feeling had an expiration date on it. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. This one's got some turns in it. Stay with me. Amy found out first. She drove up from Charlotte on a Saturday, unannounced, the way she does when something's eating at her. I heard her car on the gravel before I saw her, and when I looked out the kitchen window, she was just sitting behind the wheel, not moving, staring at the photo I'd posted of the boat like it had insulted her personally. I went out onto the porch with my coffee, smiling. "Morning, sweetheart." She got out slow. Her eyes never left the picture on her phone, then the actual truck in the driveway with the boat trailer hitch still attached. "Dad." She stopped walking. "What is this?" "That's a Boston Whaler, honey. 320. Outrage. Isn't she a beauty?" "You bought a boat." "I did." "How much?" I took a sip of coffee. 142. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a gasp. She had her phone out before she'd even reached the porch steps, and I watched her thumbs moving before she'd even said goodbye to me. I already knew who she was calling. Derek showed up the next afternoon. Amy was with him. They hadn't called first. They never do when they're arriving as a team. I've learned that much over the years. When it's just a visit, they call ahead. When they show up together, unannounced, on a weekday, it means there was a phone call the night before that I wasn't part of. They came into the living room, sat down across from my recliner, the way you'd sit across from a man you were about to negotiate with. Derek on the couch, Amy in the armchair by the window, the same chair she'd curled up in doing homework since she was 10 years old. Nobody spoke for a second. Here it comes, I thought. Derek leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad, we need to talk about the boat." "Figured you would." $142,000. Dad. He said it like I'd bought something obscene. "She's a fine boat, son." "That's not the point." Amy jumped in, arms crossed. "Dad, we're worried about you. You're 64. You should be thinking about retirement, about your health, about what happens down the road." Not buying a boat that costs more than most people's houses. Spending like what, exactly? Like you've got money to burn. I've been saving for that boat for 9 years, Amy, that's not. It's $142,000. I'm well aware of the number. I wrote the check myself. Derek cut back in, voice rising just slightly. Dad, you're living way outside what makes sense at your age. You need to slow down. There it was. Living outside what makes sense. I let it sit in the room a second. Let it breathe. You're going to blow through everything, Amy said. Quietly. But she said it. I looked at her. Is that what this is? She didn't flinch. I'm just being honest. I nodded slowly, looked down at the floor, then back up at both of them. Your mother would have had something to say about this conversation, I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. Carol had been gone 6 years, and some part of me still ran things past her before I said them out loud. All right, I said, calm as I could manage. You're right that I've worked hard for a long time, and maybe you're right that I ought to be more careful. I hear you both. Derek blinked, caught off guard. He'd been braced for a fight. Yeah, he said. So you'll take it back? Get a refund? Maybe put that toward? I didn't say that. Dad, I said I hear you. I'll be more careful going forward. I stood up, ending it there. They stayed for dinner, seemed satisfied, like they'd talked some sense into their old man. They laughed, told stories about their own kids, hugged me on the way out feeling like a couple of responsible adults who'd done a good deed for their aging father. I watched their taillights disappear down the ridge road. That night, after the house went quiet, I went into the little room off the garage that used to be Carol's sewing room and was now just my office. The room the kids never bothered stepping into because there was nothing in there but paperwork and a dusty recliner. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, pulled up my accounts. 38 active recurring payments, some large, some small, all flowing out to the same two people who had just sat in my living room and told me I was living outside what made sense. I started with the smallest one, and then I just kept going. It was the second week of July when things started to come apart at the seams. I didn't send a text, didn't leave a note, didn't make an announcement. I just sat in my recliner every evening with the news on low, and I watched the calendar turn. It started with Derek. Derek leases a 2023 Ford F-150 Raptor, payment of $891 a month. His name on the paper, my account number on the auto draft. Had been that way for 3 years, ever since his old truck got totaled and I told him not to worry about it. I'd cover him until he got back on his feet. 3 years is a long time to be getting back on your feet. I was on the porch on a Wednesday morning, coffee in hand, reading the actual newspaper the way I like, when my phone rang. Derek. I let it go twice before I picked up. Dad. His voice had that clipped sound, a man working hard to stay level. Did something happen with your bank? Morning to you too, son. Dad. My truck payment got rejected. I got an alert from Ford Credit. Said the auto draft failed. Is your account locked or something? I took my time answering. Dad. What's going on? My payment bounced. I've got a late fee already stacking up. Well, I said, you might want to look into that. Silence on the line. Look into Dad. You pay that. You've always paid that. I know. So what happened? I'm cutting back, Derek. I kept my tone even the whole way through. Not warm, not cold, just level. You told me to. Remember? A longer silence this time. The kind with a lot of thinking packed into it. Dad, the truck payment. Though, have a good Wednesday, son. I hung up, picked my paper back up. The birds out in the yard didn't care one bit. Amy took a little longer to catch on. She'd always been the sharper of the two in certain ways, but even she wasn't fully connecting the dots at first. Probably figured Derek's situation was a bank glitch, a fluke, something Dad would sort out. Then her gym membership got canceled. Then the Peloton subscription I'd been quietly covering since her divorce 2 years back just stopped working mid-ride, she told me later, the screen going dark right in the middle of a class. Then the streaming bundle on her account, the one that ran through my card because I'd set it up for her back when she moved into her first apartment, all 4 services went dark inside the same weekend. She called Derek first, I found out later, not me. But then, 3 days after that, her car insurance renewal notice came back rejected, and she called my landline directly. Dad, my insurance company just called and said my payment failed, and now I've got a gap in coverage. What is going on with your account? I'm cutting back, sweetheart. On my insurance? Dad, if I get pulled over without coverage, that's a fine, that's points, that could total my whole. You're 34 years old, Amy. You've got a job. Insurance runs, what, 90, $100 a month? That's well within what a grown woman can manage on her own. She went quiet on the other end. I could hear her breathing, working through it. I have to go, Dad, she finally said, and hung up before I could say anything else. By the third week of July, both their phone lines, which had run through my family plan since Derek got his first flip phone in high school, got dropped down to the base data tier. I didn't cancel the lines outright. I just logged into the account and turned off everything but the bare minimum. No warning from the carrier. Just a sudden crawl to a connection slower than dial-up. Derek called 4 times in one day. First call was confused. Second was frustrated. Third had an edge to it. I didn't love hearing from my own son. I picked up the fourth. Dad, what is going on? My phone won't load anything. I couldn't even pull up a job site address this morning. I had to stop at a gas station and ask directions. Like it's 1,985. Might want to look into your own plan then. My own, Dad? I've been on your plan for 15 years. I know. I'm cutting back. You told me to. I told you to cut back on the boat, Dad, not on. You said I was living outside what makes sense, Derek. I let that land in the silence a second. You came into my house and told me my spending needed a leash on it. So I put a leash on it. Those are your bills, Dad. That's different. That's your money going to your own. Most of what's on that leash was going to you. I let that sit too. Dead air for a long moment. How much of it did you cancel? He finally asked, and his voice had changed, the anger gone thin, and something more careful sliding in behind it. You have a good evening, son. My daughter-in-law, Renee, called me directly on a Friday evening, and I could tell by the sound of her that she hadn't wanted to make that call, that Derek probably didn't even know she was making it. She's always been the steady one in that marriage. And steady people don't usually go around a spouse's back unless they've run clean out of other options. Robert, please. I don't know everything that's going on, but Derek got a second notice on the truck. If he doesn't catch it up in 10 days, they're going to repossess it. And I know you know that. I do know that. He's ashamed to ask you himself. That's why I'm calling. I appreciate you calling, Renee, I really do. But that's actually the whole problem, isn't it? A 37-year-old man too proud to ask his father for help and too used to never having to ask in the first place. Those two things don't usually sit in the same person, unless somebody let them. She didn't have an answer for that. I heard her let out a breath. I know they hurt your feelings, Robert. But this is getting bad. Feelings heal, I said. Habits don't. Not unless something forces the issue. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to stop doing the thing that's already hurting them, and I was just too comfortable to see it before. She was quiet a long moment. I know, she finally said, so soft I almost missed it. I know you're not wrong. That was the last time anybody in that family asked me to stop. Now here's where it gets interesting. My brother Wade's grandson, Tyler, works out at the marina, does dock maintenance on weekends, and it turns out he's friendly with Derek from back in their high school days. They run into each other at a cookout in early August, get to talking. A few beers in, and Tyler mentions he overheard his grandfather on the phone with my sister Diane, who I'd mentioned something to in passing, who I guess couldn't help herself and told half the family that Robert's talking to a lawyer about locking everything up in some kind of trust. That's all it took. That's all Tyler had to say, because by that Sunday both my kids knew. The call started at 7 a.m. I know because I was up already, second cup of coffee, sitting on the porch watching the fog burn off the ridge. My phone lit up, and I looked at the screen and felt something settle in my chest that I can only describe as a long, quiet kind of peace. Derek, Dad, call me back. It's important. Amy, Dad, I heard something, and I really need to talk to you. By 9, Derek had called 3 times. By 10, Amy was calling Renee directly, trying to get information secondhand. By noon, the boat wasn't even part of the conversation anymore. The visits started that same week. Suddenly Derek had time on a Wednesday to swing by after work. Suddenly, Amy was driving up from Charlotte just to check on me. No occasion needed. They brought things. Derek brought a case of the microbrew I like from the place downtown. Amy brought a peach cobbler from a bakery on Merrimon Avenue. I'd mentioned exactly one time in my whole life, which told me Renee had been talking. I accepted all of it graciously, said thank you, sat with them, let them talk. I did not bring up the trust. I did not bring up the spreadsheet I'd been building since July. I let them visit, let them be warm and attentive and remarkably curious all of a sudden about how their old man was holding up health-wise, whether I was eating right, whether I needed anything around the house fixed. Funny thing, how the idea of an inheritance can turn a man's whole calendar around. If you've been with me a while, you know exactly what's coming, and I want to hear where you're watching from tonight, so drop it in the comments. Hit that like button while you're at it, we're just getting started. They thought the canceled payments were the whole punishment. They thought the trust rumor was the scare tactic, the thing meant to bring them to heel. They had no idea I hadn't even gotten to the part where I sat them down at my table with the paperwork in front of them. That part was still coming, and I'd been sitting on it, patient as a man can be, for weeks. Some men get even by raising their voice. I got even by keeping mine level and doing my homework. It was a Sunday, the last one in August. I picked that day on purpose. Sunday means nobody's got a shift to hide behind, no meeting to rush off to, no excuse to cut things short and promise to circle back later. Sunday means you sit at the table and you deal with what's in front of you. I called them both the night before, kept it short. Come by tomorrow, 1 o'clock, don't be late, Derek asked. Everything okay, Dad? Everything's fine. 1 o'clock. Amy asked, should I bring anything? Just yourself. I hung up, went out to the office, opened the bottom drawer, the one with the lock, and pulled out a folder I'd been building all summer. 38 years of receipts, records going back to before either of them could walk, 160 pages organized by year, by category, by name. I sat there a long while just looking at it, not reading, just holding the weight of it in my hands. Then I closed it and went to bed. Slept better than I had in a month. They arrived together, Derek's truck pulling into the driveway right at 12:58, and I watched from the front window as they sat in the cab for a solid 2 minutes before either one of them moved to get out. Getting their story straight, I figured, aligning up whatever they'd rehearsed on the drive up. I had the door open before they knocked. Come on in. I'd made a pot of chili, the way Carol used to make it, cornbread on the side, and the house smelled like every other Sunday it had ever smelled like in 38 years, like nothing at all was wrong. Amy tried twice during lunch to steer things toward the trust. I redirected both times, asked Derek about a job he was bidding on, asked Amy about her boys' baseball season, told them the cornbread recipe was Carol's mother's originally. Let them eat. Let them get settled in. Let them start to think maybe this really was just a Sunday lunch. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. Let's go sit in the front room. Derek took the couch, Amy the armchair by the window, same spots as June, same room, a whole different weight in the air this time. I went to the office, came back with the folder, sat down across from them in Carol's old rocker, and set the folder on the coffee table without opening it right away. I want to talk about what you both said to me back in June. Derek shifted in his seat. Dad, about that, we didn't really think it through. We were just, I know you didn't think it through. That's on me, some of it. I never sat you down and made any of this real for you. I'm fixing that today. I opened the folder, turned it around on the table so it faced them. This is a spreadsheet. 38 line items, going back to 1,998. Take a look at the first page. They both leaned in. Derek picked it up. I watched his eyes track down the page, watched them slow, watched the color drain a shade at a time. First column's the payment name. Second column's the monthly amount. Third's how many months it ran. Fourth column, I tapped the table once, is the running total. Amy was reading over his shoulder now, one hand coming up slowly to cover her mouth. I didn't say a word. I let the numbers do the talking, because numbers don't get defensive. Numbers don't have an angle. Numbers just sit there and tell you the truth whether you want to hear it or not. Derek turned the page. Then the next one. Car payments, insurance premiums, phone bills, rent help, gym memberships, streaming accounts, 2 semesters of a graduate program, Amy never finished. A down payment gift on Derek's first house that I'd never once brought up again. Medical bills, moving trucks, and 90-some other line items that had flowed out of my account into their lives so quietly they'd never had reason to notice it was even happening. He got to the last page, the total line, and just stared at it. Dad. His voice came out thin, stripped down to almost nothing. This says $960,000. That's right, I said, the way you'd read off a weather forecast. Over 27 years, give or take. The room went quiet, not an awkward quiet, not an angry one, more like the quiet right after a held breath finally lets go. Amy's eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying yet. She was hovering right at that edge where everything's fragile and one wrong word tips it over. Derek set the papers down slow, like they'd gotten heavy in his hands. I never knew, he said. I know you didn't. That's the whole point of showing you now. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, looked at the both of them straight on. You came into my house in June and told me I was living outside what makes sense. Told me I needed to slow down, needed to be careful. I let that sit a second. I want you to think, really think, before you answer me. Which part of that $960,000 was living outside what makes sense? Nobody said anything. Good. There isn't an answer. Because there isn't one. I bought one boat, I said. One. In 31 years of climbing ladders and running crews and getting up before the sun. $142,000. One time. For myself. And you two sat in this room and made me feel like a fool for it. I shook my head slow. I sat right there, and I let you talk, and I agreed with you, at least out loud. But I went into that office that night, and I thought about every single line on this sheet, and I thought, if a boat for their father is living outside what makes sense, I'd sure like to see what they think about nearly $1 million spent on themselves. Derek opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said, and he closed it again. I'm not doing this to punish either one of you. I'm not holding this over your heads. I'm doing this because I love you both, and somewhere along the way I did you a disservice by making your whole lives so soft you never had to find out what you're actually capable of. I sat back in the rocker. So here's what happens from here. I reached into the folder, pulled out a second set of papers, cleaner, shorter, drawn up by my attorney 2 weeks prior. I had my lawyer set up a trust. The money's not going anywhere. It's still yours eventually, but it's protected now. It doesn't just land in your hands the day I'm gone and disappear in 18 months. Derek, the trustee won't release $1 to you until you've held one job, the same job, for 2 straight years. Amy, you need to carry your own rent and your own bills, completely on your own, for 18 straight months first. Amy's head came up sharp. Dad, I can't do that on what I make. I'd have to. I know. That's not me being cold. That's me telling you there's something broken in a situation where a 34-year-old woman can't cover her own rent, and the answer was never supposed to be my checkbook. I held her eyes. You are smart. You are capable. And you've never once gotten the chance to find that out about yourself, because I made it too easy not to. That ends today, not out of anger. Out of love, actually, if you can believe that right now. Her chin started to tremble. The tears came slow, one at a time. Derek was still staring down at the trust document, jaw working. And the truck payment, he finally asked. All of it. Everything I canceled. Permanently? Every bit of it. He looked up. All of it, Dad? Every account? Everyone. Your truck's been your responsibility for over a month now. You figured that out already, didn't you? He held my eyes, then looked away first. Yeah, he said, quiet. I did. Right, so you already know it's possible. The room sat in silence a moment. Then Derek stood up, not slow, not calm, the way a man stands when whatever's happening inside him won't stay seated any longer. That's not what we said to you in June. Derek. I started. No, he wasn't loud, but there was an edge cutting through every word now. I have to hold one job for 2 years. Dad, I've held the same job for 6 years. What is that supposed to prove? It means holding it without a net under you for the first time, without... He let out a short laugh, no humor in it at all. So you just decided this. Went to a lawyer, canceled 38 things, and now you're handing us paperwork like we work for you. Lower your voice in my house, son. I'll lower it when I feel like it. He pressed both palms against his forehead. Do you have any idea what this summer has been for us? My truck almost got repossessed, Dad. I had to borrow $1,100 from a guy I went to high school with because I didn't understand what was happening to money I've counted on my whole adult life. Money that was never yours to count on in the first place. Silence. Flat and total. Then Amy stood too, and that's when I really saw it. Underneath the tears, something harder settling into her face. You know what, Dad? Fine. She picked her purse up off the floor. You want to play it like we're strangers you don't owe a thing to? Fine. But don't sit there acting like you did this for us. You didn't do this to teach anybody a lesson. You did it because we hurt your feelings over a boat. Amy, an $142,000 boat, Dad. We were worried about you. You were worried about what's coming to you. She flinched like I'd slapped her, because it landed, because some part of it was true and she knew it and couldn't argue her way around it. And that made her angrier than anything else I could have said to her. We're leaving, she said. Derek, come on. Derek stood there another second, something moving behind his eyes. I couldn't fully read. Anger, sure, but something younger underneath it too, something that maybe didn't actually want to walk out that door. But Amy was already headed for it, and Derek has followed his sister his whole life ever since they were kids. He picked his keys up off the side table, looked at me one last time from the doorway. I hope that boat was worth it. He walked out. The door didn't slam behind them. Somehow that was worse than if it had. A slam is a feeling. A door pulled quiet and shut is a decision. I sat there in Carol's rocker and listened to the truck back out of the driveway, listened to the ridge go quiet again. Then I heard myself exhale. A long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since June. I thought about calling my sister Diane, telling her what happened, but there wasn't anybody left in that house to tell. Just me, the folder still open on the coffee table, the chili going cold in the kitchen, and the cobbler nobody had touched sitting untouched on the counter. I got up, walked out to the back porch, looked down the slope of the yard toward the tree line where Carol used to hang the hummingbird feeders every spring. I talked to her some, out loud, the way I do sometimes when the house gets too quiet to bear alone. I built every soft landing those two ever had, Carol. Every safety net. Every quiet rescue. All of it without once asking for a thank you. One boat for myself in 31 years of work, and it got called too large. The crickets started up out past the tree line. I stood there a long while, just listening. They'll come around, I told myself, or they won't. Either way, for the first time in longer than I could remember, that wasn't something I had to carry by myself tonight. 3 weeks passed without a single word from either of them. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late September, my phone rang, and it was Derek. I almost didn't pick up. I let it ring twice before I did. Dad, he said, and his voice sounded different, quieter, like some of the fight had gone out of it. I've been thinking about the truck, about the job thing. I talked to my supervisor about a raise instead of looking for something new. Figured, since I've got to hold this job 2 years anyway, might as well make it count for something. I sat with that a second before I answered. That's a good way to look at it, son. I'm not saying I'm not still angry, he said. I am, but I get it. I think I get it now. That's enough for me tonight, I told him. It's a start. Amy called 2 days after that, and she didn't apologize either. Not exactly, but she told me she'd found a smaller apartment, cheaper, closer to her job, and she was looking at picking up a second part-time shift on weekends. She sounded tired when she told me, tired in a way that sounded like the kind that comes from actually carrying something yourself instead of watching somebody else carry it for you. I didn't offer to help. I didn't need to. I just told her I was proud of her, and I meant every word of it. I still take that boat out most Saturday mornings when the weather holds, out past the mouth of the cove where the water opens up wide and quiet, just me and the engine running low and the sun coming up over the ridge. I don't apologize to a single soul for it anymore. 31 years is a long time to wait for something that was only ever going to cost me one summer of being the bad guy in my own family. If this one hit home for you, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments where you're listening from tonight and whether you'd have done the same thing I did. I'll see you on the next one.